So I've had the unusual distinction of working for every type of media company. 5 years working for newspapers, 5 years in radio and then television, the whole time working in internet teams. And all those media types still exist, even though new media was supposed to destroy all of them. Now, they were changed by the internet, but not destroyed. And now everyone's looking at a bigger potential shift as the result of AI. And I've got just the expert to talk about it. So today I'm talking to Danny Ma. He's a principal AI engineer at LUMOS and a renowned data science educator. Danny worked with a range of organizations from banking institutions to tech giants like Google, implementing data science projects and deploying machine learning models. So Danny, can you talk a little bit about your career path and what are your current responsibilities at Lumos?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Ray. It's a pleasure to come here and have a chat.
I got
Um,
to tell you, I have been waiting for this particular talk because I had all that experience in media, and I know that you've been doing a lot of stuff with data analytics. So I think that I've been super excited to get to talk to somebody about it. I've had a lot of pent up media knowledge, or I don't know, pent up media back knowledge, I guess, and I want to know where things are today. So yeah, tell me a little bit about your how did you even get to that? I know you have a solid data science background, but how did you get involved with media and then Lumos?
yeah. So for my data science and data professional career, I've been working in this space for the past 12 years or so now.
Wow.
And I kind of fell into data. After university, I was looking for a role, and I just had a few people who put me in touch with some of Australia's data consulting area. So I got a role firstly in a data consultancy, and my first kind of rodeo in that space was actually in marketing analytics. So this was, I wouldn't say it's so much full on media, but we were looking at individual segments of customers and trying to see what they purchased. We were working for a retailer, so the equivalent of Walmart in Australia, and we were kind of combing through the data and trying to make sure that we were sending people the right message at the right time to try and get them to purchase more of these brands and these products within the supermarket. And that kind of led me to the path down to where I am now, where I'm currently working with Lumos, and I'm currently also working as a data consultant, mostly focused on the real-time analytics and customer analytics, and also for data engineering as well. So I've kind of had to apply all these skills that I've picked up throughout the years to identify exactly. Well, I love doing machine learning and trying to predict when things are going to happen. So,
Mhm.
and a lot of that experience came from actually trying to get the data in the right shape. So,
Mhm.
I think of my background as almost a data generalist to massage the data into whatever form I need it to go into to get it to work to try and solve business problems.
And
And
that's
my
yeah.
current, oh,
Sorry, I was gonna say
you
that's
go.
really the key to like any business, and especially media, that it has so many needs. It's always had, I think, data in different ways. So it's really good to see that you have that kind of background. I know that you have this really super interesting background. You were a Google ambassador, a student ambassador for Google, for a while. Then you worked as an intern, I think, at Finity Consulting. And it says here, I think it says somewhere that you were kickboxing, that you're into kickboxing as well. So, and I like it that when you came in, you said that you kind of fell into it. I feel like everybody that I've interviewed says the exact same thing. So don't feel weird about it. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about sort of your education. Like, how did you get to know so much about data?
So I have only a bachelor's of
Hmm.
commerce. I don't have extreme degrees or PhDs or anything like that.
Hmm.
But my majors were in actuarial studies or actuarial science, so it was
Hmm.
quite heavy in mathematics and also in economics. So the economics part, I liked the concept of trying to understand how the economy was working. But my major focus was mostly on the actuarial studies. I enjoyed math as a kid, and it was the thing that my teachers kind of pushed me towards. So when I was doing my undergraduate, I had the opportunity to go and do some internships. So these were in mostly in insurance companies. This is where
Hmm.
the actuarial studies usually gets applied to predict, I don't know, usually life insurance or health insurance and other initiatives like that. Um, I started working there, and I felt that there were more opportunities or other problems that I could solve using the data skills that I had learned throughout my studies, and that kind of led me down the path of trying to work within the data space.
Hmm.
And then from there, I kind of fell into it, and
Hmm.
I would say I fell in love with working with data and the sort of problems, and I think I just get really drawn to solving difficult problems. And luckily for us in this time, where data is kind of one of the biggest problems, but also one of the biggest opportunities, I've had to really hone my skills and learn a lot in a really short amount of time to help all my clients and all the businesses I've worked with to solve their problems.
Yes, and that's definitely something that, yeah, I guess you grew into. And then when did you start learning like all sort of the technical aspects, like the SQL, the R, the Power BI, like whatever tools you actually needed to use?
I learnt them mostly all on the job. So the we back in the day when I was studying, we had some R. I didn't learn any SQL at all when I was studying, and when I was coding in R, there weren't any of the popular packages that we have right now. Um, we I think Python was a thing, but no one really used it back then. At least in my circles anyway. So I kind of had to pick up all of these things on the job, um, and they were just a means of necessity to try and answer the problem or to hit the database where the data was living. Um,
Hmm.
and I've been really lucky to have lots of great mentors and people who have helped me along the way. And that sort of led me down the path to then becoming an instructor and trying to share back my knowledge with the community during the pandemic period, and it's kind of led to where I am now, where I
Hmm.
have all this. So I'm doing the data consulting, but I also have the my data with Danny initiatives running in the background as well. So I've been very proud to have helped a lot of students go through that and to teach SQL in, I would say, in the way that I would have liked to have learned when going through the process and learning things myself. Oh, yeah, that's the Data with Danny website.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I just love solving problems, but I equally love also sharing my skills to help other people solve their problems as well.
Hmm.
So these are probably the two big passions of mine.
That's amazing. So another common theme in just about everybody that I talk to is that kind of ability to share knowledge and also, the importance of making those connections and learning. So can you talk a little bit about sort of how you started doing that? You mentioned that, you got interested in kind of sharing with others. Was it meetups that you went through, or was it some sort of other community thing that you started?
Mm. Um, when I first I think when I first got the bug to try and share my knowledge with other people and to do some teaching was actually when I was still working. I was working in a corporate job as a data scientist, and I realized that my the favorite parts of my job was to one, when I was working on some difficult problems, but also two, when I was preparing and planning all these training sessions for the rest of the team. So whether this was like an onboarding process or anything like that, where I could present in front of a group some projects that we were working on and kind of step through the process. Um, so from there, I felt this urge to kind of take that to the next level and to share it online and to really force myself to be out there and start building my personal brand, but also to give back and help others who didn't have the same fortune as me to be have all this great access to great mentors and really good resources when I was learning these skills. Um, so then during the when we were all stuck at home, there was just an opportunity to kind of get out there and do something interesting and do something helpful. I remember in those days I was just at home, maybe playing video games or doing something with my time that was not quite as productive as, but potentially sharing, doing live streams or recording myself solving some problems and trying to share knowledge or write some posts on LinkedIn. So it kind of, yeah, everything just all kind of came together in a way. And I had a few people recommend me to, oh, why don't you think about doing a course or writing some more about this or starting a newsletter or all these other ideas. And things just kind of snowball from there once you have a little bit of momentum.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good story. So I did want to start talking about how media has changed over time. And I know that, me having experience like newspapers to like radio to TV. And I think that, then, being in the internet during that time. I feel like everybody thought the internet was going to destroy everything. I think the hardest, when I got hired at the newspaper, which was my first kind of effort, it was to kind of come in and change news. When I got into radio, I think they were very kind of slow in trying to figure out how they could do that. So, can you talk a little bit about sort of the evolution of maybe media and how data has actually changed over time being used in media?
Mm, that's a great question. I can talk about how I've experienced
Hmm.
the data to drive who is getting the media. So that has been mostly my experience working with different corporates to try and understand customer behavior and to try and serve them the right message at at the right time at the right channel. So there's
Hmm.
always this concept of trying to figure out that sweet spot of, okay, does my customer need to hear about me about something specific that can change their behavior? And I view media as this in terms of um, oh in terms of I view the media to, I don't know, as a almost as a vehicle to change this behavior. In one sense, where it's a little bit different to traditional in terms of the media, where when you talk about your experience in terms of the advertising and maybe even TV. From my perspective, a lot of my work has been on how we should use the media to change behavior,
Yeah.
um, which I think that's the space where data really excels
Hmm.
in trying to identify who we should send it to. But I think that, and I really feel that right now it's moving in the direction of how can we better create the media that people actually are wanting to see, and then getting it in front of people in the right channel or the right avenue where they actually have the opportunity to see it as well.
Yeah, and I know that we saw a kind of a big change in how radio specifically sort of worked as a result of Nielsen and how they changed their traffic. So I do have like a little bit of background or information that maybe you're not aware of, but in the old days of radio, Nielsen used to be the king of data gathering for radio, and the problem was that the way that they got this data was by having people, they would send out and sample people representative of a larger audience. And they would send them out basically surveys, but they were like physical kind of surveys. And basically, the people would kind of write down what they thought they listened to during the week. So it was like a journal that you filled out. You filled out a journal saying, "Hey, I think I listened to this, and this, and this." One of the big changes that happened for us at some point was that they started actually giving people kind of like a pager sort of system, almost like a little thing that you attach to your belt. And then what really changed was that they started to get the ability to have real, live data, and that meant that you could start tracking everything that people listen to. So you were no longer dependent on people's memory, uh, and you were more dependent on the pager. So if you went into a shop and the shop had a radio station playing, the pager will be able to pick that up. And so that was a huge, huge change. One of the results of that was that radio stations started to get data that I think everybody knew. Like you knew that when you got in the car, if people started talking too much, you switched the channel to try to get, some song that you enjoyed. And they didn't really have that. They kind of knew that, but they didn't have it. And that's not how the surveys would be done. So that gave them real time data or much quicker data. And that had this really huge impact. Like one of the things that happened was they started to attempt to have some stations that didn't have any DJs. Because another thing that found out, if people were talking too much and people just want to listen to something, they would quickly change the station. Of course, if you went to an ad, people would quickly change the station. And so that had this impact of maybe we'll try doing some radio stations without people. And so I say that because I think this kind of comes to today where there's a station out there. I don't know if you've seen it called Chat or Radio GPT. So this is an attempt to have a radio station basically without any people. And so this is sort of an interesting approach that I think is happening as a result of perhaps some data. I don't know if you haven't heard it. It's basically a radio station. All the DJs are AIs, so there's no people in the radio stations. They sound fantastic. They sound like exactly like radio people. The commercials that this radio runs are all AIs as well. So instead of having people record the commercials, they have AIs talk to each other, and they sound exactly like the type of ads that we would do. And so I think this is exactly what perhaps people are afraid of that is going to happen. With AI. I don't know what your thoughts are about something like this. And perhaps, that's one thing that happened when I was there. I don't know exactly what's happening with media now and what things are kind of being measured. So maybe you can fill me in on some of the newer stuff that's happening now.
That looks super cool in terms of the radio GPT. Like,
yeah,
it's phenomenal if it can also sound like a human and they're kind of having the same language as you would expect from a radio as well. That's super cool.
Yeah, this is crazy. Like it actually also is able, like their goal is to be able to basically make the ads from what's happening, like all the content, all the news content, the weather, all that stuff gets built from, either data from weather, what's happening in Facebook, like it reads all the Facebook content to find out what's happening. And it actually will build a kind of news segment based off of the things that are happening. And then it's crazy. It's a completely automated version of radio. And it's definitely, I think, exactly what people are sort of scared about. Now, one thing that I'll say is that the bright sort of, spark in what I learned from going through that experiment where all of a sudden they had a bunch of radio stations without any DJs. They would have basically DJs that would pre-record. They didn't have the AIs back then, but they had basically DJs that could pre-record some of this content and never be there. So at the time when I was in radio, if you were a DJ, you were already pre-recording almost everything. Like all the calls would be pre-recorded, and they had some quick editing, systems that they were be able to call upon. And but they weren't able to, not to this level. But what they ended up finding out, which I thought was really interesting, is that one of their assets that they used in radio was the human being being able to be somewhere. So if they had, like, for example, I lived in the Orlando area. So if they had some artists coming down to Universal Studios, they needed a physical presence of somebody that people knew from the station. So the sort of pre-recorded voices that were doing 50 radio stations at the time, they couldn't be there for that event, or they couldn't go to. A lot of times, like radio stations would send people to like a location, and on the radio they would call and they would say, "Hey, we're right here at the corner of 50 and Colonial Drive or whatever, and come down and we have like T-shirts and stuff," and they would get people excited to maybe come to a business and come to a location. The interesting thing back then was that they found out that by getting rid of the people, they actually lost value because they had no people to send to things and no personalities that could, capture like audience. And they ended up putting like like almost getting rid of that approach and putting all the people back because they said, yes, we still do need people. So I'm just wondering what you think about that and what you think about perhaps where AI is going and if you think that we're going to see that same cycle repeat itself.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of the cycle repeating itself for this example where you needed to actually have the people physically there to try and drive the audiences, um, I'm thinking that in the future, I wonder if AI would have a big impact on that. Right
Yeah,
now,
right?
it's like,
You
right
can't
now,
send somebody, a
yeah.
physical person, to be somewhere. And radio stations would also do. So part of my job, I was like the multimedia person there. So I did like all the design for like vehicle wraps. And so we would have like a Hummer with all the graphics, and you would send that thing out to a place. And then we did a lot of branding. You would host concerts. All that stuff actually needs human beings. I don't know that AI can never do that. I don't know what your thoughts are. Like, I don't know that AI can replace that fully. Definitely something like Radio GPT is going to be attempted and tried. But I think that there is a human component that just can't be ever replaced because people don't, I mean, what are they going to do? Maybe a robot eventually. I don't know. R2D2 or something will show up at your event, but it's not the same.
Yeah. Like, so with my work at Lumos, we essentially deal with trying to measure who is seeing those ads that you were mentioning. So like those car wraps and the
Mm-hmm.
different if someone is hosting a live event, we can try and see who's around that area to try and
Mm-hmm.
estimate some actual audience reach. And I think this is an area where AI could have an impact, where
Mm-hmm.
we're starting to see some things where like all those different assets, they could be dynamic to and respond with certain ads to people who are nearby based off their demographics or their different behavioral segments as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is one of the ways where AI could have an impact, is trying to identify what the best advertisement is, or which brand would be optimal to show at different assets at different points in time based off the people who are around at that point in time. Um, it's a little bit different to, I think, maybe traditional media in the sense where it's not effectively radio or anything like that. But I feel
Mm-hmm.
that advertising is always going to have this sort of physical aspect to it, which it's going to be very hard to replace with, um, let's say, an AI, which is going to automatically do all of this for you. So there's always going to be some sort of learning from data and trying to get that physically in front of people, which I find really exciting. And this is one of the reasons why I've joined the team at Lumos as well.
Yeah, so a couple of a few shows ago, I talked to somebody who was interested in this concept of dark data, which is that companies have all this data that they have already gathered, right? They have like location data, they have I don't know, how many people have watched certain things, but they don't really understand what to do with it. So, what sort of, I think, data gathering things do you think are going to be useful for this kind of market where that's media based?
Mm. At the moment at Lumos, we focus on trying to become the data aggregator to try and bring everything together and provide that level of intelligence where we have mobile device data and lat long
Mm-hmm.
locations of where people are moving around. Based off this, it's de-identified data, but we can still track it at an individual mobile level. So
Mm-hmm.
from there, we can kind of see where people are moving. You can see which locations or which physical brick and mortar stores people are visiting. Where do they spend most of their time at during the day or at nighttime? And from there, you can really get some interesting insights in terms of actual people's behavior, where they're visiting, what time they leave the house, and different things like that. Not that we'd have it's always jittered a little bit to protect people's privacy,
Mm-hmm.
but once you layer on information in terms of, oh, I wonder what subscriptions these people have, or where are they spending their money, and trying to bring in all these other data assets from companies, or even directly from first party application data. So you can imagine, let's say, an Uber Eats or something, they clearly have data from people, where they are, where they're ordering, what sort of food are they ordering. And with this really rich data, you can really paint a really clear picture of who's actually, one, who's actually seeing your advertising, and two,
Mm.
who are the actual target audiences that you might want to reach with your marketing and branding as well. So it kind of works in both ways to try and, one, understand people's behavior and how they operate on a day-to-day basis, but also to understand it from a marketing perspective and a branding perspective of, oh, these are what my people are actually are doing. I think having that component and trying to bring together the data to serve that sort of need on, as a service, has been really exciting.
Mm.
And I think that there's a future in this sort of space to try and get down to like we think of it as like a personalized segment of one, where, Ray would be this specific person, and then we might be able to tailor some advertising or some messaging which is perfect for Ray's consumption methods.
That's really interesting. And I think that, when I first got into the internet, we were everybody was talking about how this is the future. The future is going to be personalized, like ads, like being able to track all kinds of information about users. And I think that we are there right now. But now we have this additional layer of AI getting into everything. And there's been a lot of talk about the use of copyrighted data. So one of the things that happened recently is this Sarah Silverman just sued OpenAI and Meta over the fact that they may had copied her memoir, because she mentioned that some people have been asking to take her writings and summarize them. And so how could these AIs summarize her information if they didn't already get it from somewhere? And that would be copyrighted data. So I don't know what your thoughts are regarding like AI and copyright information. Like, what are the sort of issues, and perhaps where do you stand on where we should be with that? Because although for advertisers that's really tempting, that's also something that people worry about.
Mm. Sometimes I think about the generative AI aspect of like, where is the data coming from? That has to come from somewhere. Um,
Hmm.
I feel that having that data and knowing about its copyright and its sourcing and
Hmm.
exactly where it's coming from and what sort of rights we have to use it, that's going to be very, important, especially in this landscape where I think people like this, the article that you were showing, there's going to be some issues in the future. And I think I come from mostly using hard data to try and like get some insight out of it, as opposed to using it to generate um, new assets or things with the generative AI. But I can definitely see that there's a big demand for that sort of technology to be used to create future ads, or to make the creatives, and the advertising much more efficient, and to create that much more efficiently as well.
Yeah, I think that everybody, for the long time, like everybody always heard that when you're not paying for something, you are the data. So, there's been all of these, I don't know, privacy policies that perhaps people never read. And I think Google recently made a change where they are specifically adding to their privacy policy that pretty much everything you do on Google products is going to be able to be fed into their AIs. And so I think we're at that place where, you were looking at that 14-page privacy policy, and you're probably going, I don't know, just like say, okay, 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 and just forget about what it said. But now people are going like, whoa, hold on. That means that, they're going to be able to do some things, and you're actually seeing the results of what they are able to do. So I saw another article today about how OpenAI just partnered with Shutterstock to be able to, use their data in some of their own tools. And so I think that we're seeing that sort of partnership now of technology companies uh, where they are now, where they in the past had used all of this open data that is just stuff that you see on the internet and are starting to get sued, that you're seeing these ability of companies to maybe partner and get, train their AIs with other sources that are quote unquote, I'm going to say legal, because the answer of whether or not that copyrighted data that these companies were able to get, I think the issue is nobody knows if it was on the internet, is that considered fair use? Can a company that's training access that? There's another article of where Japan said they agreed that you could train AIs and copyright did not apply to the training of AIs. So, who knows where everybody is going to, where this is going to end up. Clearly, it's in the process of being litigated right now. And so we're going to have to, I guess, figure that out, right?
Mm. I honestly think it's above our pay grades to try and say which
Well,
way we should go.
it's
But
yeah, I think like we it's definitely fun to have opinions and to talk about it. Yeah, I think that, you know, I always feel that companies kind of end up doing whatever they're doing. And then the legal teams will come do their thing on top of it. And then we're going to end up somewhere. But right now, it kind of feels like the early days of the internet. It's a little bit of the Wild West. Nobody knows what's going on. And companies are adjusting. Countries are like the EU is coming out with their own, different standards. They drafted a EU act that talks about these rights between people and AIs. And so, interestingly enough, almost none of the AIs are currently able to adhere with this draft EU AI Act policy because it's just too new right now. So companies are kind of in the middle of how much of this can I use right now, and nobody really knows. And I don't know how long it's going to take, how those regulation stuff will have an effect, and I don't know. I think we're like you said, it's kind of above our pay grades, but it's somehow I feel like it's somehow coming. Like it's happening. It's weird because it's happening super fast and it's happening as we speak, like daily, which is different because you've been around long enough in the age of the internet to know that that seemed like it was fast, but it's nothing compared to what's happening now. So, do you have any
mm,
examples of maybe traditional media practices that have been significantly maybe improved through the use of AI? Or maybe for media specifically and the data that you work with that has the most potential to get significantly better?
mm. I think better understanding the types of media. So trying to like, let's say we're going into an advertising space, or we have all this video data that's coming in, well, which previously we would never be able to get the data out of. It would just be the video itself, maybe some metadata around what type of video or what the content was about. But now you can get down to very minute levels of, oh, this is like the thing that was in the frame at this point in time, or these are the colors that were used, or this is the style. And I think there's a bit of stuff where we can almost like get the transfer learning and get it to be applied on these sort of states, which are really useful or interesting, that led to more views or more likes. And then almost like training up some AIs to try and figure out exactly what is making people tick or what is going to go viral, and trying to generate some new creatives from that. I think that might be very interesting. I know from our work at Lumos, we're trying to understand which ads are driving more traffic or which ads are driving a lot of behavior in the backend. So right now we're trying to link the entire end-to-end experience to say, oh, someone has seen this ad. Can we then identify that person going into a brick and mortar store, or can we then retarget them with some advertising on social media or on different assets to actually track their shopping behavior online afterwards. So I feel that stitching all these data points together would be quite useful to try and understand the impact of advertising, and in turn that would probably help drive probably more, maybe more investment in certain advertisements or creatives which are doing well, to try and make the spend for advertising much more efficient. Traditionally, advertising has not really been well measured. It's always been like a thumb in the air to try and say whether this ad has moved the needle for a specific brand or any sort of company. So I hope that in the future we can kind of have a better understanding of, okay, we've ran these sorts of advertising, and over this point in time, did it lead to a significant uplift in sales or outcomes that the brand is trying to achieve? So for me, like I'm really interested in how the better understanding of data and being able to apply some machine learning algorithms on the new data, where we can kind of take this in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you're seeing already a lot of spend happen in AI and data. That's why I think the job of a data analyst is so exciting and, potentially the biggest sort of, I don't know, the coolest job that's out there right now, because it does combine the business kind of sense with the data and the analytics and the science of determining all those things. Right now, with this addition of AI, I think we have like all of this, the company, I don't know if it's necessarily stress, but we're already seeing like this huge increases in advertising, specifically for things that are AI related. We're seeing all this like money spent on companies that are doing that already. And it looks like we are just at the beginning. AI's ability of being able to, personalization is great for advertisers, but like you said, AI allows for micro segmentations of customers, so they're delivering the relevant content to support this marketing campaign. I almost feel like there are ways in which all this stuff is going to be used, that we haven't even imagined yet. Like you're in the tip of it, I think, right now with your company, Lumos, and you're just getting an inkling as to the things that are going to be happening. Do you have any concerns about all this regulation, sort of movement that is happening in the US and the EU, potentially sort of stifling the growth of this thing?
Mm. I feel for us, we're always looking on the horizon to make sure that we're
Yeah.
making the right tech decisions and also the right, I would say the data investment decisions as well when we're onboarding new data partners onto our platform. We try and aim for things which, when we play it out to like a 5-10 year kind of time frame, of course we can't tell the future, but we try and partner with the companies who we think have almost like privacy as like one of their core principles, to try and make sure that we're not overreaching in terms of, yes, we're trying to understand our customers, but not in like a super creepy way. Whilst we've worked with some companies where things can get really, really segmented to the point where it almost sounds like too good to be true. It's like, oh yes, we know that this person is at this specific location and they purchase like this brand of soy milk once every week at 3 p.m. on a Friday. Like, I think very specific insights like that, like we were always very skeptical of whether it's super accurate, but also just to be able to stitch all that data down to an individual level is a little bit creepy. So we're always trying
Definitely.
to like mitigate ways which data is going to be used for like bad actors in that sense. Like, and then also from a security perspective, if you're holding onto that much data, we want to try and make sure that we're not a big target for people to try and hack to get people's
Mm.
personal information. So a lot of our principles are around trying to not have as much personal information as we can. So our partners might have some personal information which they're using, and they're kind of they wouldn't be selling it, but it's kind of available to onboard onto the platform. But more often than not, we'll err on the side of caution and just say, please don't send us anything which is personalized, because we want to do things properly with much more longevity. In terms of tech decisions for which AI do we choose or which company do we partner with to try and bring out the AI initiatives that we're trying to build on. I think a lot of the times, most of our stuff, we're working with Google directly to try and leverage their platform and their data capabilities and also their AI capabilities. But we're kind of always on the fence to see how deep we dive in right now, or do we kind of stay on the fence a little bit to see how all the big players kind of battle it out for AI supremacy in the short term before we kind of like bunker down on, okay, we're going to invest a few $1 million into this sort of platform to build out our own vision. So I think we're kind of still on the fence in terms of how we exactly implement a lot of the stuff. And also, like, we're also trying to be on the cusp of trying to identify the exact initiatives that we want to go after to use the machine learning and the AI capabilities in the first place. Because what we see now is there are so many different opportunities that we probably don't even know about that are just around the corner. And so we're always trying to keep an eye out for where we can apply the AI and the machine learning in a way that makes most sense commercially, instead of just kind of going about trying to build all the new fancy things that everyone wants to see, but might not have a lot of commercial value. So it's always like this kind of balance between, yes, we want to use all this cool tech, but it has to be for a purpose as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think we're exactly in that place. There's so many things happening that everybody wants to get into it, and there's that creates like this massive amount of opportunity. But right now, you don't even know, who the players are going to be, like the people that are going to be able to deliver, what companies need. We just saw, for example, Elon Musk announced a new AI company to compete with ChatGPT. I believe that just was announced like yesterday. We saw Claude from Anthropic launch its version 2.0 yesterday. All these things are happening, and I think that lots of opportunities, not a lot of clear sort of winners as to who's going to win out. We have OpenAI, Microsoft partnerships. I think Claude is partnering with Google, and so many things. It's like images, video is going to be another huge thing that's going to change. So it feels crazy, and it'd be really interesting to have you back in a period of time, whatever it is, like the way this stuff is moving, it could be like 3 months just to see where things have grown in that little period. You think I'm kidding, but if you think about it, like so many OpenAI announcements just happened within like the last month and a half. It's just like I lived through the dot-com boom and bust, and I've never seen anything like it. So I did want to close with one of the things that you've done a super good job of is growing your brand with AI and social media. You're a LinkedIn top voice. You have more than 100,000 followers. So, talk to me about that aspect of what you do. And then also, perhaps you can share some of the tools that you use, some of these maybe AI tools that you use to make a difference in your life.
Absolutely. I I'm very honored to be a LinkedIn top voice, and also to have grown my social media on LinkedIn to where it's at right now. But I always feel like there's more that I can always grow my audience even further, and to continue producing great content which resonates with people. Um,
Mhm.
One of my main focus when I was starting off in the early days, when I only had like a few hundred followers or anything like that, was I would force myself to just keep showing up and to post content which I thought would help at least one person. So my when before I was posting more on LinkedIn and on social media, I'd always be on the fence of like, oh, I don't know if I should post this because people might not like it, or there might be a backlash or anything like that. But once I once I settled on the mindset of, okay, I'm gonna post it if I can help at least one person, um, and not worry about the consequences or if people don't like it or anything like that, then I would just go and post it. So I think that was probably one of the secrets to my initial growth, was to just keep posting and like try and keep it. Nice
I
and
love
fun
this,
and
by the
light.
way.
Yep.
This is a great meme from you. So yeah, you
That's not,
should definitely follow Donnie. Danny, he's doing fantastic. He's really good. Like I love that attitude that you just want to show up and pose for one person, um, and also the consistency. I know that that's one of the things that I did this year was just decide. You know what? I'm just gonna do a show every week. Sounds crazy. I'm of course too busy. I love the amount of green that you have in your house. So when I was looking through your photos of your setup and stuff, I thought I thought that was fantastic. And you have so much fantastic content. So I think you've stumbled upon the secret of social media. Like just have that ability to show up consistently and keep on keeping on. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. So good to hear that. That's very encouraging. I think even for me. This is something I just started, this kind of weekly series. I think we're on episode like 26, I think, or seven. And, you know, takes time, right? Anything takes time.
absolutely. It's very,
And
you've done an amazing job with
oh, well,
how
thank you.
you've grown this out as well.
Well, it's been my pleasure. And I think I feel like just like you show up, provide value, don't worry about the traffic, have fun, do something that you're going to be enjoying to do, I think. Is what made sense for me. Just like even if I love, you know, it's funny because I'm not an extrovert, even though people think that I am, but I love talking to people that I can relate to in some way. It's much easier for me to talk to somebody like you who has not necessarily a similar background, but things that we can connect on, like media, you know, data, you know, programming. Those are all. I feel like it's so weird. I should make like a profile of the all the guests because I feel like there's some sort of like chart where there's going to be percentages of the same things happening over and over and over. It'd be a really good study to do. So thank you so much for making it. I just want to mention a couple of things. We have a bunch of different ways of, you know, getting into information about the show. We have a LinkedIn page, and you can find out about all the guests there. The best way to learn what's going on is to sign up for the newsletter. Every week you get a copy of the video and also show notes as well as all the links that we talked about. And I usually put a few extra links in there. Then we have an episode guide where you can find about all the upcoming guests and then also the past guests. And then there's, of course, if you're into YouTube, there's a YouTube playlist where you can check things out as well and, you know, learn more about the show. There's also even an audio version of the show, which is a little bit edited down so that it's more focused. And, you know, I try to make it a little bit shorter and more focused. So next time we are going to be talking to Jess Ramos. She is a fantastic data analyst with a great story. And we're going to be talking about what people should do to, if they're interested in getting a job, what a data analyst job is like. As I mentioned, Danny, I think it's a really cool career to be in right now. I feel like if I was doing it all over again, I might end up in that space instead of where I am today. Really happy though with where I am. Kind of like a developer, and this ability to talk to fantastic people has really got me, I don't know, excited about the future. So thank you so much for your time, Danny.
Thank you again, Ray. It's been a pleasure.
All right, take care.